They laughed the morning Lorraine Pike stood in front of the old blacksmith forge with a coal shovel in her hand. The factory manager had brought 2 engineers, a county inspector, and a demolition notice printed on bright white paper. Behind them, beyond the chain-link fence, the new metal press rose over the edge of town, $6 million of polished steel, hydraulic arms, computer screens, warning lights, and confidence. In front of them stood Lorraine, 76 years old, thin as a fence rail, wearing her father's old leather apron over a faded blue dress, guarding a cold forge everyone in Mercer Falls had called a fire hazard for years. One of the young engineers looked at the cracked brick chimney and smiled. "Ma'am," he said, "that thing belongs in a history book." A few workers laughed near the gate. Even the county inspector lowered her eyes to the clipboard to hide a smile. Lorraine did not raise her voice. She only turned her eyes toward the factory and listened to the deep, uneven thump coming from inside. Then she said, "So does your machine, if you keep ignoring the sound it's making." They laughed harder then. By sunset, nobody was laughing. The factory's new press split open during second shift, stopping the entire line and putting hundreds of jobs at risk. And when the engineers finally asked the old woman what she had heard, Lorraine walked back into that dead forge and pulled out a steel pin her father had marked 43 years earlier. That pin would not just explain the crack. It would reopen the mistake the town had buried with her father. If stories about old hands, forgotten skills, and the things people are too quick to throw away mean something to you, consider subscribing. Because what happened in that cold forge was not just about a broken machine. It was about a promise, a buried mistake, and the sound of truth finally coming through steel. The forge sat behind Pike Machine Repair, like a black scar the new town wanted erased. Everything around it had changed. The gravel road had become a 2-lane service route. The old feed store across the street was now a parking lot for factory workers. The fields east of Mercer Falls had been flattened into loading docks, security fences, and bright white lights that burned all night. But the forge remained. Its brick chimney leaned west. Its tin roof sagged. The front door still carried the iron latch Silas Pike had hammered by hand in 1954. Inside, the air smelled of ash, rainwater, and cold metal. To most people, it was a fire hazard. To Lorraine Pike, it was the last place in town that still remembered how steel sounded before it failed. She had just unlocked the door that morning when the county truck pulled in. Behind it came Owen Mertens, the factory manager, wearing a dark jacket with the new plant's logo stitched over his chest. 2 engineers followed him. The taller one was Evan Caro, young, clean, and confident, with a tablet tucked under one arm. Beside them stood Beth Danner from County Code Enforcement, holding a folded orange notice. Lorraine knew what it was before Beth opened it. Her grandson, Caleb, knew too. He stood near the fence in his blue factory shirt, lunch cooler in one hand, eyes fixed on the gravel. Caleb was 32, tired, and carrying more bills than he admitted. His wife needed medicine. His truck needed tires. His job at the plant was the only steady thing he had left. That was why his silence hurt before anyone said a word. "Mrs. Pike," Beth said, "we've completed the final inspection." Lorraine kept the coal shovel in her hand. Owen stepped forward. "This structure has been classified as unsafe. Fire risk, collapse risk, environmental risk. You've received 3 notices already. It hasn't held fire in 20 years, Lorraine said. "That isn't the point." "No," she said quietly. "I suppose it isn't." A few workers near the gate laughed. Not loudly at first, just enough to let her know they had come to watch an old woman lose. Owen glanced back at the factory, then at the forge. "We're trying to build a future here. Good jobs, real wages. This building sits inside the expansion zone. It was here before your expansion had a name." Evan Caro gave a small smile. Not cruel. Almost worse. Careless. "Ma'am," he said, "with respect, no one needs a blacksmith forge beside a precision manufacturing plant." Lorraine turned her head toward the factory. From the west bay came the heavy rhythm of the new press. Thump. Pause. Thump. Then, beneath it, a thin metallic ping. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Evan blinked. "Hear what?" "The press. Left frame. It changes tone when the load shifts." Owen's smile tightened. "This is not about the factory." "It will be." That was when they laughed harder. One man near the gate said, "Maybe the old forge is talking to her." Another answered, "Maybe the machine hurt its feelings." The laughter moved through the workers like permission. Caleb looked away. That hurt more than all of it. Lorraine could bear strangers mocking her. They had mocked her since Silas died and left her with a building nobody wanted and a promise she still did not fully understand. But Caleb had once sat on the forge floor with soot on his cheeks, watching her father heat steel until it glowed orange. Caleb had once believed every sound in that room meant something. Now he only looked ashamed. "Grandma," he said softly, "please don't do this here." Owen heard the weakness and used it. "Caleb has a good position with us," he said. "We value him. It would be unfortunate if family complications made things difficult." Caleb's face flushed. "Mr. Mertens, it's all right," Lorraine said, but it was not. The threat had been polished smooth, but it was still a threat, and everyone near that gate had heard it. Beth unfolded the orange notice. "You have 48 hours to remove personal property from the structure. After that, the county may secure the site and proceed with demolition." The paper snapped in the wind. Lorraine looked past it, toward the factory. The press struck again. Thump. Then that thin ping, sharper now. Her father's voice came back as clearly as if he stood beside the anvil. "Metal always speaks before it breaks." Evan smiled at her. "Mrs. Pike, our sensors are clear." Lorraine lowered the shovel. "Sensors hear numbers," she said. "Steel gives warnings." No one answered. Owen took the notice from Beth and taped it to the forge door himself. Bright orange paper against old black wood. 48 hours. Lorraine did not tear it down. She did not beg. She walked inside, past the cold hearth, to the workbench where a short steel pin lay wrapped in oilcloth. On one end, her father had stamped 3 marks by hand. S. P. 1978. Outside, Caleb called her name once. Lorraine did not answer. Across the road, the factory press struck again, and this time, the ping sounded like something beginning to crack. Lorraine Pike had learned to hear metal before she learned to read music. Her father said both required patience. Silas Pike was not a large man, but inside the forge he seemed larger than the building itself. He had forearms darkened by soot, hands cut by 1,000 small mistakes, and a way of standing near the fire that made even grown men wait before speaking. In Mercer Falls, people brought him broken gate hinges, cracked trailer brackets, plow points worn thin, hay hooks, stove handles, and once, the bent frame of a church bell cradle after a storm dropped a sycamore limb through the steeple. Silas fixed almost everything, but he never fixed quickly. He would turn a piece of steel under the light, tap it once with a hammer, then listen as if the answer came back through the room. When Lorraine was 7, she asked him what he heard. "Not words," he said, placing the hammer in her small hands. "Warnings." She tried to laugh, but Silas did not. "Metal is honest," he told her. "It complains before it gives up. Most folks just wait until it screams." Lorraine grew up with that sentence. Other girls in town learned piano, sewing, or church hymns. Lorraine learned color. Dull red, cherry red, orange, yellow, white. Too hot, too brittle, ruined. She learned that steel could be stubborn, but not cruel. She learned that a clean ring meant one thing, and a dead sound meant another. By 12, she could hand her father the right tool before he asked. By 16, she could shape a hinge that closed smooth enough to make Silas hide a smile. The forge was never just a shop to her. It was breakfast biscuits wrapped in cloth and eaten on an overturned crate. It was her mother calling from the back door when supper cooled. It was winter mornings when frost silvered the inside of the windows and Silas let Lorraine stand closer to the fire than usual. It was the mark of his hammer on every useful thing in their house. Then the factory came, not the bright new plant that stood across the road now, but the old Mercer Press Works that opened in the late 1960s, when everyone said the town was finally leaving hard times behind. The plant needed brackets, locking pins, repair plates, and emergency fixes faster than outside suppliers could ship them. Silas got the contract because he knew metal and because men trusted him. For a while, that contract fed the Pike family. Lorraine was 29 when the accident happened. She remembered the day by the weather first. Heavy August heat. No wind. The kind of morning when even the flies seemed tired. She had been helping Silas clean a set of pins for the plant when a siren began to wail from across town. Not the tornado siren. The factory siren. Silas stopped moving. He did not ask what had happened. He only looked down at the pin in his hand. By noon, Everyone knew a press frame had failed inside Mercer Press Works. A worker named Daniel Reeves had been caught near the left support assembly. He lived, but not whole. His right leg never worked properly again. By evening, people were already saying a bad pin had come from Pike Forge. Lorraine heard it first outside the grocery. Silas should have stayed with horseshoes. She turned so fast, the woman speaking went pale. But Lorraine said nothing because Silas had taught her that anger, like steel, could crack if struck wrong. Her father said even less. County men came to the forge. Factory men came too. They took invoices, sample pieces, order slips. Silas answered every question with his hat in his hands. Lorraine waited for him to slam a fist on the bench and tell them they were wrong. He never did. That silence became heavier than accusation. Within 2 weeks, Mercer Press Works canceled the contract. Within a month, men who had once waited 3 days for Silas to repair a hay rake began driving to shops 2 counties over. Her mother stopped going to church supper because whispers followed her down the aisle. Lorraine stopped shopping in town unless she had to, and Silas kept the forge open. He worked smaller jobs, gate latches, stove plates, old farm tools, things people left at the door without staying to talk. Sometimes, late at night, Lorraine would find him at the bench with a stack of drawings spread beneath the lamp. If she stepped close, he covered them with his hand. "Not yet," he would say. "Not yet for what?" But he never answered. Years passed. Mercer Press Works changed owners, then closed, then sat empty until the new industrial corridor came and covered the old foundations with concrete and promises. Lorraine married, lost her husband early, and returned to help Silas after her mother died. She told herself she had come back for practical reasons. The roof leaked. His hands shook some mornings. He forgot to eat. But the truth was simpler. She could not leave him alone with the silence. In his final winter, Silas grew thin enough that his wedding ring slipped from his finger. Lorraine moved a cot into the front room because he refused to sleep far from the forge. Some nights, he woke, asking whether the fire had gone out. Some nights, he called her by her mother's name. Only once did he speak clearly about the building. It was 3 days before he died. Snow had pressed against the windows. The forge was cold because he was too weak to let her light it, afraid an ember might escape while he slept. Lorraine sat beside him with a quilt over her knees, watching his fingers move against the blanket as if shaping invisible steel. "Don't let them tear it down," he whispered. Lorraine leaned close. "The forge?" His eyes opened. "Not the bricks," he said. She waited. His breath caught, then steadied. "The truth needs a place to wait." Lorraine did not understand. Not then. She thought grief had tangled his words. She thought he meant memory, his tools, his name, the dignity the town had taken and never returned. So she promised. After Silas died, she found the locked tin box beneath the lower shelf of his workbench. It was no bigger than a lunch pail, black with age, sealed with a small brass lock. She searched the house for the key and never found it. On the lid, Silas had scratched a mark with a file. S.P. Under it, barely visible, unless the light struck sideways. 1978. Lorraine kept the box where it was. For years, she told herself she was protecting her father's name. That was the wound she knew how to carry. The town had blamed Silas Pike for a failure he never explained, and Lorraine had spent almost half a century standing guard over the only place that might one day speak for him. But wounds have a way of becoming beliefs. By the time Caleb was old enough to run barefoot across the shop floor, Lorraine had turned the forge into a kind of chapel. She taught him how to hold a hammer, how to wait for heat, how to hear the difference between a clear ring and a tired one. He loved it then. He loved Silas's old stories, the leather apron, the way sparks rose like fireflies when Lorraine let him strike a soft piece of iron. Then he grew up. Mercer Falls needed paychecks more than memories. Caleb chose the new factory because the forge had never paid medical bills, never offered insurance, never promised a future. Lorraine understood that. Understanding did not make it hurt less. On the morning Owen taped the demolition notice to the door, Lorraine was not only defending a building, she was defending the last unfinished sentence her father had left behind. And as the new press thumped across the road, with that thin metallic ping hiding beneath its rhythm, Lorraine felt something shift inside her. For 43 years, she had believed the forge was waiting to clear Silas Pike's name. Now, for the first time, She wondered if it had been waiting to tell her something harder. Something her father had not been brave enough to say while he was alive. By noon the next day, the orange notice on the forge door had become a kind of public entertainment. People slowed their trucks when they passed Pike Machine Repair. Some pretended to read the notice. Others did not pretend at all. Two boys from the high school stopped long enough to take a picture with their phones, one of them pointing at the crooked chimney like it was a joke nobody had to explain. Lorraine watched from the kitchen window and said nothing. The forge had looked useless to the town for so long that people had forgotten it had ever served a purpose. To them, it was only a blackened shed with a dangerous roof and an old woman attached to it. They did not see the marks on the floor, where men once stood waiting for repairs that could not wait until morning. They did not know the left wall still held hooks Silas had placed by size, not by habit, so his hand could find the right tool even in smoke. They did not know the anvil's far edge had a shallow curve from 50 years of drawing out hot steel. Lorraine knew every scar in that room. There was the burn mark near the coal bin from the winter of 1962, when a lantern fell and Silas smothered the flame with his own coat. There was the split board under the east window where Caleb, at 9 years old, had dropped a hammer and cried because he thought he had ruined the shop. There was the narrow groove in the workbench where Silas rolled small pins to test if they were true. That groove mattered. Lorraine stood over it now, holding the steel pin marked SP 1978. She placed it in the groove and gave it a gentle push. The pin rolled straight for 6 inches, then stopped with the stamped end turned upward. Silas had made it balanced, deliberately. Even the mark had weight in it. She went to the shelf beneath the bench and pulled out the locked tin box. The brass lock was green at the edges. She had tried keys over the years. Every old key in the house. Every key Silas left in jars and drawers and coat pockets. None had fit. This time, she was not looking for the key. She was looking at the shelf. Behind the box, the wood was darker than the rest, protected from dust for decades. When Lorraine moved the box aside, she saw 2 shallow holes in the back plank. Not nail holes. Alignment marks. Her father had used marks like that when fitting hidden brackets inside machinery, little guides no one else would notice unless they knew how he thought. Lorraine reached under the shelf and felt along the wood. Nothing. She tried again, slower. This time her fingertips found a strip of metal tucked flat against the underside. She pulled. It did not move. She pushed it left. Something clicked inside the shelf, old and reluctant. A narrow panel behind the box loosened. Lorraine's heart gave one hard beat, but inside was not a confession, not money, not a letter clearing Silas Pike's name, only a folded survey map, yellowed at the creases, and a small iron mold wrapped in cloth. The map was of the Pike property, drawn long before the industrial corridor. Lorraine carried it to the window. The forge was marked in pencil. Behind it, where weeds now grew waist-high near the fence, another rectangle had been drawn and labeled simply, "Pin bed." Lorraine frowned. She knew that ground. Everybody did. It was the strip Owen wanted, cleared first, the ugly patch of broken concrete and scrub brush between the forge and the factory fence. In the county notice, it had been included as part of the demolition zone. But on Silas's old map, the pin bed was not part of the forge. It was a separate foundation, a working foundation. Lorraine went outside with the map in one hand and the pin in the other. The sun was high, sharp enough to make the factory's metal siding glare white. Across the road, the press continued its heavy rhythm inside the West Bay. She heard it even over the trucks. Thump, pause, thump, and under it, still there, that thin wrong note. Near the fence, Beth Danner was speaking with a county surveyor. Owen stood beside them, pointing toward the back of the forge. He stopped when he saw Lorraine coming. "You're not authorized to move anything beyond the posted structure," Beth said. Lorraine unfolded the map. "Your notice marks this back foundation as part of the condemned building." Beth adjusted her glasses. "That area falls within the unsafe site." "No," Lorraine said. "It falls within the expansion zone." Owen's eyes narrowed. For the first time, Lorraine saw something pass across his face that was not amusement. It was impatience. Maybe concern. "That old map has no legal standing," he said. "Then why are you in such a hurry to cover the ground behind my forge?" Evan Caro had come up from the gate, tablet in hand. He looked from the old map to the broken concrete beyond the weeds. "What is a pin bed?" he asked. Lorraine turned the small iron mold over in her palm, a place for casting and checking locking pins before finishing. Evan almost smiled again, but not fully. For farm equipment? For press frames, Lorraine said. That made him stop. Owen stepped between them. This is speculation. Mrs. Pike is under stress. She's connecting old shop scraps to a modern facility that has passed every inspection. Has it? Lorraine asked. Beth touched the orange notice on her clipboard. Mrs. Pike, this does not change the 48-hour deadline. No, Lorraine said. I expect it changes why you set one. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, an old voice came from the road. Silas never liked that ground being paved. Lorraine turned. Walt Kessler stood beside a rusted pickup, one hand on the door for balance. He was 80 if he was a day, narrow and bent, with suspenders over a washed-out shirt. He had worked at Mercer Press Works in 1978. Lorraine had not spoken to him in years. Owen looked annoyed. Mr. Kessler, this is an active site. Walt ignored him. His eyes were fixed on the pin in Lorraine's hand. Where'd you find that? He asked. In the forge. Walt swallowed. Lorraine saw it. A small movement, but real. You know this pin, she said. Walt took one step back. I know enough to say you ought to leave it alone. Did my father make the bad pin? Walt looked toward the factory, then toward Owen, then back to the ground. No, he said quietly. Lorraine felt the word move through her like heat, but Walt was already turning away. Then who did? She asked. He did not answer. As he climbed into his truck, Lorraine noticed his hands were shaking. Evan watched the truck pull away. Beth pretended to write something on her clipboard. Owen's face had gone hard. Lorraine looked down at the iron mold in her hand. All her life, she had believed the forge might one day prove her father innocent. For the first time, she understood it might do something more dangerous. It might prove who had needed him blamed. And why? Lorraine waited until after dark to open the tin box. Not because she was afraid of what might be inside, because she was afraid there might be nothing inside at all. The house had gone quiet. Across the road, the factory still glowed under white security lights, the press line running behind steel walls as if nothing in the world could interrupt it. Caleb's truck was gone from his driveway. He was on night shift. Lorraine could imagine him in his safety glasses, pretending not to hear jokes about his grandmother and her dead forge. She carried the black tin box to the kitchen table and set it beneath the hanging lamp. For years, she had treated it like a relic. She had dusted around it, moved it only when rain came through the forge roof, and told herself the right key would someday appear. But the orange demolition notice had changed something. 48 hours did not leave room for reverence. She wrapped the lock in a dish towel, set the tip of a cold chisel against the brass, and struck once with a hammer. The sound made her flinch. The lock held. She struck again. On the third blow, the brass split. Lorraine sat still for a moment, breathing harder than the work required. It felt wrong, breaking something her father had kept sealed. Then she lifted the lid. Inside were no confession letters, no folded deed, no photograph of some guilty factory man shaking Silas's hand. Only a bundle of damp-edged papers, 2 small steel samples wrapped in wax cloth, and a receipt from an old machine supplier in Topeka. The top sheet was a drawing, but half the corner had been torn away. Lorraine held it carefully under the light. It showed a locking pin assembly, not the whole design, just enough to make her lean closer. The pin had a shoulder near the head, a stress groove placed farther back than she expected, and a handwritten note along the side. Do not approve replacement lot without live load test. Below that, in Silas's square handwriting, left frame sings before failure. Lorraine touched the words. Then she heard the press across the road. Thump, pause, ping. She closed the box and reached for her coat. The county archive opened at 9 the next morning. Lorraine arrived at 8:30 and waited on the concrete steps with the tin box in her lap. By the time Beth Danner unlocked the side entrance, Lorraine's fingers were stiff from the cold. Beth stopped when she saw her. Mrs. Pike, this really isn't necessary. I need the accident record from Mercer Press Works, August 1978. Beth's face changed in the small way people's faces changed when they had already decided to say no. Those records have been digitized. Then I need the digital copy. Beth looked past her toward the parking lot. You'll have to file a request. I am filing one. There's a process. There was a man hurt, Lorraine said. There was an investigation. My father's name was dragged through this town for 43 years. I would call that a process, too. Beth's mouth tightened. But she led Lorraine inside. The archive room smelled of toner, old carpet, and paper that had been handled too often. Beth typed at a computer while Lorraine stood beside the counter. After several minutes, Beth frowned. That's strange. What is? The index shows the case file. But the scanned document is incomplete. How incomplete? Beth clicked twice. There's an incident summary, 2 witness statements, no engineering appendix, no supplier list, no material analysis. Lorraine felt the old anger rise, slow and heavy. Who removed them? I didn't say anyone removed them. No, you said incomplete. Beth looked toward the hallway. I can request the storage log. Do it. A voice behind them said, Mrs. Pike. Lorraine turned. Evan Caro stood in the doorway with his tablet under his arm. He looked less amused than he had the day before, but not apologetic. I heard you were here, he said. From who? He hesitated. Mr. Mertens. Lorraine gave Beth a look. Beth lowered her eyes to the keyboard. Evan stepped closer. I understand you're worried about the press, but the machine has passed ultrasonic inspection, stress modeling, thermal monitoring, and load cycle analysis. Lorraine opened the tin box and placed the torn drawing on the counter. Did it pass this? Evan glanced at it. For 1 second, his face sharpened. Then he covered it. That's an old sketch. It's a warning. It's not a certified drawing. No. Certified drawings are the ones that get people comfortable. He gave a tired breath, almost a laugh. Mrs. Pike, you can't walk into a factory with a broken lockbox and a 40-year-old scrap of paper and tell trained engineers their machine is failing. Your machine is already telling you. That brought the smile back. Soft. Professional. Worse than laughter because it pretended to be kindness. Maybe, he said, you're hearing what you need to hear. Lorraine closed the tin box. She had been dismissed before. By women in grocery aisles. By men at hardware counters. By neighbors who accepted Silas's guilt because it was easier than asking who benefited from it. But hearing it from this young man, with his clean hands and borrowed certainty, made something old burn in her chest. Outside the archive, Caleb was waiting beside his truck. He had not come alone. Owen Mertens stood with him. Lorraine understood before either man spoke. Owen smiled. Mrs. Pike, I wanted to make a better offer before this becomes unpleasant. It already is. We'll increase the site compensation by 30%. You sign the release today, remove personal items, and we handle demolition quietly. And the pin bed, his smile thinned. There is no pin bed. Lorraine looked at Caleb. Did you know about this? Caleb rubbed one hand over his face. Grandma, please. They're trying to help. They're trying to hurry. They're trying to keep the plant open, he snapped. Do you understand what happens if you keep pushing this? My supervisor already asked why my grandmother is harassing the county. Annie's prescriptions don't get paid with old stories. The words hit exactly where Owen meant them to. Lorraine looked at her grandson's factory shirt, at the grease already darkening one sleeve, at the shame and fear pulling his face tight. I am not trying to hurt you, she said. But you might anyway. For a moment, she had no answer. That afternoon, Lorraine walked to the factory gate with the steel pin wrapped in cloth. She asked to see Evan. She did not get past security, but enough workers gathered that Evan finally came out, annoyed and red around the ears. Lorraine held up the pin. Strike it, she said. Evan stared. What? With your wrench. Strike it. Then strike the one in your left frame assembly. The workers laughed. Someone called, Now she's giving music lessons. Evan looked embarrassed for her. Mrs. Pike, I'm not conducting a sidewalk demonstration, because you already know it won't sound the same. That made the laughter louder. Evan stepped closer and lowered his voice. Go home before you make this worse for your grandson. Lorraine wrapped the pin again. She walked back to the forge under every eye at the gate. At 10:41 that night, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice was not. Welt Kessler. Your father didn't make the bad pin, he said. Lorraine sat up in bed. Then who did? Silence. Walt. His breathing trembled through the line. There was a replacement lot, cheaper alloy. Came in after Silas refused to stamp it. Who signed for it? A sound came from his end of the phone. A knock, maybe. A door. Walt whispered. Don't trust the clean drawings. Then the line went dead. Lorraine held the phone in the dark. Across the road, the factory press struck again. And beneath the thump, the ping came back, sharper than before. Caleb did not come to the forge the next morning. Lorraine saw his truck leave before sunrise, the headlights cutting across her kitchen wall as he backed out of his driveway. He did not stop. He did not call. And by 8 o'clock, the factory across the road was already awake, its loading doors open, forklifts whining, the new press line thumping behind the west wall with the same heavy rhythm as before. Only now, the wrong note was no longer hiding. Lorraine could hear it from her porch. Thump, pause, ping. It was thin, bright, and too sharp. Not loud enough for most people to fear, but clear enough for Lorraine to feel it in her teeth. She carried the tin box back into the forge and spread everything across the workbench. The torn drawing, the 2 steel samples, the supplier receipt from Topeka, Silas's pin marked SP 1978, and the small iron mold she had found behind the shelf. Then she took down an old measuring caliper from its hook. Her father had kept it wrapped in oiled cloth. Most people would have called it outdated, but the jaws still moved cleanly. Lorraine measured Silas's pin first. Diameter, shoulder length, groove depth, taper, head width. Then she measured the 2 samples from the tin box. One matched Silas's pin almost exactly. The other did not. It was close enough to fool a man in a hurry, close enough to fit into the same assembly. But the shoulder was thinner, the stress groove sat too near the load point, and the metal felt different under her file, not softer exactly. Cheaper, less patient. Lorraine placed both pins on the groove in the bench and rolled them. Silas's pin traveled straight. The replacement pin drifted left before it reached the end. She stared at it for a long time. Then she whispered, "You knew." She did not know whether she was speaking to her father, to the forge, or to herself. By noon, she had made a rubbing of the torn drawing and copied the measurements into Silas's old ledger. Her handwriting shook at first, then steadied. She was not trying to prove a memory anymore. She was building a record. At 1:17, her phone buzzed. A photograph appeared from Caleb. No words. Just a blurry image taken from inside the factory. Lorraine enlarged it with 2 fingers. It showed part of the press frame, low near the left support assembly. A locking pin sat beneath a bracket, half hidden by grease and shadow. Caleb had risked taking the picture. Lorraine studied it until the screen dimmed. Then, she called him. He answered on the 3rd ring but said nothing. "Where are you?" she asked. "Break room." "Can you talk?" "Not long." "The pin in your picture," Lorraine said. "It is not my father's design." Caleb exhaled sharply. "Grandma, listen to me. The shoulder is wrong. The groove is too close to the stress point. You can see that from a picture?" "I can see enough." There was noise behind him, lockers, men talking, a vending machine humming. Caleb lowered his voice. "It made that sound last night." Lorraine closed her eyes. "What sound?" "The one you keep talking about." He hesitated, as if the words embarrassed him. "The ping." Lorraine gripped the phone tighter. "When?" "Near the end of the load cycle. Not every time. But when the left frame came down hard, I heard it through the floor." "Did anyone else hear?" "I told Mason. He said machines make noise." "Mason your supervisor?" "Yeah." "And?" "He said, unless a sensor trips, we don't stop a $6 million press because my grandmother has ghost stories." The anger that moved through Lorraine was cold, not hot. "Caleb," she said, "find something metal, a rod, a long screwdriver, anything straight." "What?" "When you go back, put one end against the frame housing, not near moving parts, somewhere safe. Put your ear close to the other end. That sounds like how men lose teeth. Do it only if you can do it safely." He was quiet. Then, softer. "Grandpa Silas used to do that with me." "Yes," Lorraine said. "He did." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then someone called Caleb's name in the background. "I have to go," he said. "Caleb." "What?" "If it rings clean, it is just working. If it clicks under the ring, something is moving that should not move." He did not answer, but he did not hang up right away either. At 3:42, the photograph disappeared from Lorraine's phone. Caleb had deleted it. At 5:08, he sent another message. "I heard the click." Lorraine sat down before her knees could fail her. A minute later, another message came. "Small line near left bracket. Like a scratch. Mason says casting mark. Lorraine typed with both thumbs. Hairline crack. Do not stand near it. The answer came almost immediately. If I report it again, they'll write me up. Lorraine looked toward the factory. For 43 years, people had called Silas Pike's warning imagination, guilt, excuse, pride, anything but what it had been. Now the same kind of warning was living inside another machine, and her grandson was standing close enough to hear it. She put on her coat. By the time she reached the factory gate, second shift workers were coming in. Caleb was not among them. Security stopped Lorraine before she could pass the guard shack. I need to speak to Evan Caro, she said. He's on the floor. Then get him off it. The guard glanced at her, then at the forge behind her, and almost smiled. Lorraine took Silas's pin from her pocket and set it on the counter inside the guard shack. Tell him the old woman brought the sound he failed to hear. The guard did not like that. But he called. 10 minutes later, Evan came through the side door wearing safety glasses and irritation. Mrs. Pike, this has to stop. It will, Lorraine said, one way or another. She opened Silas's ledger to the measurements she had written. Evan glanced down. His impatience lasted only a few seconds. Then he saw the numbers. Lorraine watched the change in his face. First dismissal, then calculation. Then the beginning of doubt he did not want anyone to see. Where did you get these? From the pin my father kept, from 2 samples in his box, and from the picture Caleb sent me. His expression hardened. Caleb took a picture inside the plant? He heard the click. Evan looked toward the West Bay. For the first time, he did not laugh. A supervisor came out before he could answer. Mason Hargill, square-built, red-faced, already annoyed. What's this about? Lorraine looked past him toward the factory wall. From inside came the press. Thump. Pause. Bing. This time, even Evan turned his head. Mason did not. Machine's running fine, he said. Evan held out a hand. Let me see the pin. Lorraine did not give it to him right away. Will you stop the press? I can request a visual inspection. That is not what I asked. Mason laughed once. Lady, shutting that line costs more in 10 minutes than this whole shed of yours is worth. Lorraine looked at him. Then she placed Silas's pin in Evan's palm. It may cost more not to. At 6:26, Evan entered the West Bay. At 6:41, he found the hairline crack. At 6:44, Mason told the crew it was cosmetic. At 6:52, Caleb texted Lorraine one final message before his phone went silent for the shift. He saw it. He knows. They're still running. Lorraine stood outside the gate with the cold wind moving through her coat and the forge behind her like a witness no one had sworn in yet. Across the road, the press kept working. But now, every strike sounded less like production, and more like a countdown. At 7:13 that evening, the West Bay went silent. Not all at once. First came the sound Lorraine had been hearing for days. Thump. Pause. Bing. Then came a sharper sound beneath it. A hard metallic snap that cut through the factory wall and reached the forge like a rifle crack across frozen ground. Lorraine was standing at her kitchen sink when she heard it. The glass in the window trembled. For 1 second, the whole factory seemed to hold its breath. Then the alarms began. Red lights flashed above the west loading doors. Workers spilled out through the side exits in bright safety vests, some walking fast, some running, all turning back to look at the building as if the steel walls might open behind them. A forklift horn blared and did not stop. Someone shouted for the second shift to clear the floor. Lorraine grabbed her coat before the phone rang. It was Caleb. His voice was thin and breathless. Grandma, are you hurt? No, I'm outside. I'm okay. She closed her eyes for half a second. What happened? The press cracked, left frame, bigger than before. Evan pulled 3 of us back right before it let go. Where is he now? Inside with Mason and Mertens. They're saying it was contained. Contained. Lorraine looked out the window. Workers were still coming out. That word means they're scared, she said. Caleb did not argue. By the time Lorraine reached the gate, the factory yard was full of men and women standing in small groups, helmets in their hands, faces pale under the security lights. Nobody laughed when she came up the road. Some looked away. Some stared at her, as if they were seeing her for the first time. The guard did not stop her this time. Evan Caro met her near the West Bay door. His safety glasses were pushed up on his forehead. His face had lost its clean confidence. There was a streak of grease across his sleeve and another on his jaw. as if he had touched his own face without knowing it. "You were right about the crack," he said. Lorraine looked past him. "I know," he swallowed. "I need you to look at something." Behind him, Owen Mertens was arguing with Mason Hargill and Beth Danner. Owen's voice was low but sharp. "No outside personnel on the floor. We have procedures." Evan turned. "She's not outside the issue anymore." Owen's eyes moved to Lorraine. "This is a controlled industrial incident, Mrs. Pike. You need to leave." Caleb stepped out from a group of workers. "No," he said. It was the first time Lorraine had heard him say that word without fear in it. Owen looked at him. "Caleb, you're not helping yourself." Caleb's hands curled at his sides. "She warned us." The words moved through the workers like a draft. Beth Danner looked from Caleb to Evan. She hesitated, then said, "Mr. Caro, if there's reason to believe she has relevant information, document her presence and keep her clear of moving equipment." Owen's face hardened, but he did not stop them. Inside the West Bay, the air smelled of hot oil, scorched dust, and frightened electricity. The press stood in the center of the floor, enormous and still. Its left support frame opened by a jagged crack that ran from the lower bracket up toward the housing. It had not exploded. It had not killed anyone. But the damage was ugly enough that every person in the room understood how close it had come. Lorraine walked slowly. Evan pointed to the assembly beneath the frame. "This is the pin you asked about." The locking pin sat half-shadowed under a cracked bracket, still in place, but not straight. One side had polished bright where it had shifted under load. Lorraine crouched with effort, Caleb moving quickly to steady her elbow. She did not thank him. Not because she was ungrateful, but because the moment was too tight for softness. She leaned closer. "Light," she said. Evan handed her a flashlight. Lorraine shone it along the shoulder of the pin. There it was. The stress groove, too close to the load point. She touched the air beside it, not the metal. "This is not my father's design," Mason Hargill snorted behind her. "With respect, ma'am, that's a standardized replacement component." Lorraine looked back at him. "That is exactly the problem." Evan said nothing. She rose slowly and held out her hand. "Show me the drawing." Evan opened his tablet and brought up the digital blueprint. He zoomed into the left frame locking assembly. Lorraine saw clean lines, revision numbers, approval stamps, everything modern records were supposed to have. But she did not see what mattered. "Where is revision C?" Evan frowned. "This file goes from B to D. Then your drawing is missing the warning." Owen stepped closer. "That is an old documentation gap, not a cause." Lorraine turned to him. "Old gaps become new cracks." Nobody spoke. Evan stared at the tablet, then at the damaged pin. "Revision C," he said quietly. The index mentioned a missing appendix. Beth's eyes shifted. Lorraine heard it. So did Owen. Evan looked up. "Mrs. Pike, do you have the rest of that drawing?" "No," Lorraine said. "But I know where my father would have put it if he wanted steel to keep it safe." She walked out of the factory with Caleb beside her and Evan behind them. Owen followed all the way to the gate, protesting under his breath about liability, contamination, procedure. But the workers had turned to watch now. That made him careful. That made him slower. The forge waited across the road, black against the factory lights. Lorraine unlocked the door. Inside, the air was cold enough to make Evan breathe into his hands. He looked around the room differently this time. Not as a curiosity, not as a ruin, as a place that might know something his tablet did not. Lorraine went to the old bellows at the back wall. In all her years inside the forge, she had oiled its handle, patched the leather, dusted its frame, and cursed the mice that nested behind it. But she had never removed the lower hinge plate. Silas had told her once, when she was young, never to take apart a tool unless she understood why it had been built that way. Now she understood. "Caleb," she said, "the small wrench, third hook from the left." He found it without asking where. That alone nearly broke her heart. Together, they loosened 2 square bolts blackened with age. Evan held the flashlight. The hinge plate came free with a soft scrape. Behind it was a narrow space between brick and wood. At first, Lorraine saw only dust. Then the flashlight caught dull metal. A steel tube, capped at both ends, rested inside the wall cavity. Caleb reached in and pulled it out. It was heavier than it looked. On the side, stamped by hand, were the same letters as the pin, S, P, and below them, Reverend C. Live Load. Lorraine's fingers shook when Evan unscrewed the cap. Inside was a roll of oilskin tied with black thread. No one spoke while she opened it on the workbench. The drawing inside was complete. A full locking pin assembly. Stress groove moved back. Shoulder widened. Load path marked in red pencil. Beside the design, in Silas Pike's handwriting, was a note: replacement lot fails under angled pressure. Do not install without redesign. Left frame will sing first. Then split. Evan leaned both hands on the bench. For the first time since Lorraine had met him, he looked young. My God, he whispered. Caleb stared at the drawing, then at Lorraine. He knew. Lorraine looked down at her father's handwriting. Yes, she said. He knew this part. But as she lifted the oilskin, another paper slipped from behind the blueprint. A receipt. Not from the supplier. From Mercer Press Works. Payment issued to Silas Pike. September 1978. The line item was typed cleanly. Consulting closure and non-disclosure settlement. The forge seemed to grow colder around her. Caleb looked at the receipt, confused. Evan looked away. Lorraine did not move. For 43 years, she had waited for the paper that would prove her father had been wronged. Now she had found it, and underneath it, she had found the first sign that he had also agreed to be silent. Owen Mertens reached for the receipt before Lorraine could fold it. Caleb caught his wrist. It happened so fast that everyone in the forge froze. Owen looked down at Caleb's hand, then up at his face. Careful. Caleb let go, but he did not step back. That paper doesn't belong to you, he said. Owen straightened his jacket. If it concerns the press line, it concerns the company. Lorraine placed the non-disclosure receipt beneath her palm. The forge was quiet, except for the factory alarms still pulsing faintly across the road. Red light flickered through the small window above the coal bin. It washed over the anvil, the bellows, the steel tube, Evan's pale face, Caleb's clenched jaw, and Owen Mertens standing in a place he had tried all week to reduce to rubble. Beth Danner stepped inside with her clipboard pressed against her coat. What did you find? She asked. Evan answered before Owen could. Revision C, he said. A live load warning from 1978. It matches the failure pattern on the current press. Owen turned sharply. It matches nothing until it has been authenticated. It predicted the left frame split. It is a 43-year-old shop drawing found in an unsafe structure by a private citizen with a personal grievance. Lorraine looked at him. You were happier when I was just an old woman with a shovel. No one laughed. Beth moved closer to the bench. Her eyes fell on the receipt. Lorraine saw the moment she read the words non-disclosure settlement. Beth's face closed. This site may now be part of an active investigation, she said. Lorraine looked at her. Meaning? Meaning no one removes anything else from this building until county council reviews it. Owen nodded quickly. That's the correct procedure. Lorraine understood then. If they could not tear the forge down by calling it unsafe, they would freeze it by calling it evidence. Beth must have seen the look in her eyes because she said, softer, Mrs. Pike, I'm not trying to bury this. Then don't help them hold the shovel. Beth did not answer. Across the road, workers stood outside the factory in loose groups. Some had gone home. Others remained because nobody had told them whether they still had jobs in the morning. Rumors traveled faster than official statements. A cracked press became an explosion. A shutdown became layoffs. Lorraine's name moved through those rumors like a match through dry straw. By 9 o'clock, Caleb's phone would not stop buzzing. At first, he ignored it. Then he read one message, and his face tightened. What is it? Lorraine asked. He shook his head. She took the phone gently. A coworker had written, Tell your grandma thanks. My wife's asking if I still have insurance next month. Another. Plant shuts down because of this. People won't forget. Caleb took the phone back. They're scared. So am I, Lorraine said. That doesn't pay anybody. The words were not cruel. That made them worse. Evan gathered the blueprint and receipt with gloved hands, photographing each item on the bench before touching it. His training had returned now, but something in him had changed. He was no longer protecting the machine. He was protecting the chain of proof. Owen watched him. Evan, before you make a career-ending mistake, remember who signs off on internal reporting. Evan did not look up. Internal reporting isn't enough. You don't know that. A frame split under load after a documented warning predicted it. A preliminary document. A suppressed document. Owen's voice dropped. Choose your words carefully. Evan finally looked at him. I am. The silence after that felt dangerous. Then a truck pulled up outside the forge. Walt Kessler climbed out slowly, leaning on the door until his balance settled. He wore the same suspenders, the same washed-out shirt, but his face looked older than it had the day before. As he entered, his eyes went first to the steel tube, then to the receipt beneath Lorraine's hand. You found it, he said. Lorraine did not move. You knew where it was? Walt shook his head. I knew Silas kept something. I didn't know what. Did you know about the settlement? His mouth worked before sound came. Yes. Caleb made a bitter noise. So everybody knew except us. Walt looked at him. Not everybody. Enough. Lorraine stepped away from the bench as if distance might keep the receipt from meaning what it meant. Tell me, she said. Walt took off his cap. He held it in both hands. In '78, the plant ordered a replacement lot of locking pins from a cheaper supplier. Silas inspected a sample and refused to stamp approval. Said the alloy was wrong. Said the groove was cut too close. Said it would sing before it split. Evan looked down at the blueprint. Walt continued. Management didn't want delays. Big order was due. They found another shop willing to sign off. After the accident, blaming Silas was easier than admitting they had bypassed him. Lorraine's throat tightened. Then why didn't he say so? Walt's eyes filled, but he did not let the tears fall. Because they put the whole town in his lap. No one spoke. They told him if the plant got sued, it would close. Men would lose jobs, mortgages, grocery credit, health coverage. Daniel Reeves was already hurt, and they said fighting would not give him his leg back. They offered Silas money, not much. Enough to keep the forge open a while. Enough to make silence look like sacrifice. Lorraine gripped the edge of the bench. My father took it. Walt nodded. He hated himself for it. That doesn't change that he took it. No, Walt said. It doesn't. The truth landed without mercy. For 43 years, Lorraine had carried her father as a wronged man. Now she had to carry something heavier. A good man who had been frightened into doing the wrong thing, and then had hidden the proof where only time could reach it. Caleb looked toward the factory yard. If this goes to the safety board, how long does the plant close? Evan answered quietly. Weeks. Maybe months, if they trace the design lineage. Caleb laughed once. Hollow. Months. Owen stepped in immediately. Or, we can avoid panic. We replace the assembly, review the historical documents internally, and bring the line back safely. No public spectacle, no layoffs. Lorraine looked at him. And the men hurt in 1,978? Owen's expression hardened. Most of those claims are beyond any reasonable legal window. Reasonable, Lorraine repeated. Beth looked away. Caleb spoke before Lorraine could. Grandma, if the plant closes, Annie's insurance goes with it. That was the blow Owen had been waiting for. But it did not need him to deliver it. Caleb's fear did the work. Lorraine saw Annie's pill organizer in her mind. Monday through Sunday. Morning and night. She saw Caleb counting overtime hours at the kitchen table. She saw the workers outside the factory, smoking under red lights, pretending not to be afraid. Then she saw Daniel Reeves dragging a bad leg through the grocery aisle when she was young, while people whispered her father's name behind canned peaches. The forge felt smaller. The choice felt crueler. Beth stepped toward the door. I'm sealing the building tonight. No removal of documents until council arrives. Owen nodded. Good. Lorraine picked up Silas's pin before Beth could speak. Beth saw it. Mrs. Pike, this one is mine. Owen said, it may be evidence. Lorraine closed her fist around it. No, she said. It's a warning. Outside, the factory alarms finally stopped. The quiet that followed was worse. Lorraine did not sleep that night. The forge had been sealed by county tape, but the pin remained in her coat pocket. She sat at the kitchen table until dawn, with Silas's mark pressed into her palm, listening to the quiet across the road. For the first time in years, the factory did not thump through the dark. No press. No rhythm. No wrong note hiding under the noise. Just silence. And in that silence, Lorraine began to understand why her father had spent the last years of his life near the forge but never truly inside it. He had not been guarding a memory. He had been living beside a confession he did not know how to make. At 6:12 the morning, Evan Caro knocked on her back door. Caleb stood behind him. Neither man looked as if he had slept. Evan held a folder under his arm. Caleb held a paper grocery bag. "What is that?" Lorraine asked. Caleb set the bag on the table. "Coffee. And copies." "Copies of what?" Evan opened the folder. "The current press assembly specifications. I pulled them before Owen locked engineering access." Lorraine looked at him. "That could cost you your job." "It probably will." Caleb sat down across from her, his face drawn. "We need to know if this is just our machine." Lorraine already knew the answer before Evan spread the pages across the table. The modern drawings were cleaner than Silas's old blueprint. Computer-rendered lines, revision stamps, compliance notes, digital approval codes, but beneath all that polish, the shape was familiar. Tout familiar. Lorraine placed Silas's revision C, drawing beside the current press spec. Evan put a ruler across both. The room went still. "The load path is wrong," he said. Caleb leaned closer. "What does that mean?" "It means the current pin assembly still follows the cheaper replacement geometry," Evan said. "Not exactly the same part number, but the same mistake. The groove is still too close to the highest stress point." Lorraine looked at the red pencil on her father's drawing. "Left frame will sing first. Then split." Her father had not been warning about one bad batch. He had been warning about a design habit, a shortcut that learned how to wear new clothes. Evan turned another page. "This assembly lineage appears in 3 press models. Maybe more. I can't confirm without full records." Caleb's face went pale. "So this could be in other plants?" Evan did not answer quickly enough. Lorraine closed her eyes. The first consequence of the truth was no longer about Mercer Falls. It had spread. By 8, Walt Kessler arrived with an envelope folded inside his coat. He did not knock like a visitor. He stood on the porch, as if waiting to be judged before entering. Lorraine let him in. He set the envelope on the table. "Silas gave this to me in 1986, Walt said. Told me if Lorraine ever found the drawings, I was to give her the rest. Lorraine did not touch it. You waited 40 years. Walt lowered his eyes. "I told myself he never meant it. Then I told myself you were better off not knowing. Then I got old enough that lies started sounding like prayers." Caleb looked at him with open anger. Lorraine opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, folded into thirds. Silas's handwriting. The same square letters. The same careful pressure. But the hand that wrote it had trembled. Lorraine read the first line and had to stop. "My girl, if you are reading this, then the steel finally spoke louder than my fear." She gripped the edge of the paper. The letter did not excuse him. That was what hurt most. Silas wrote that he had inspected the replacement lot and rejected it. He wrote that Mercer Pressworks had bypassed him, used another supplier, and kept the line moving. After Daniel Reeves was injured, management came to the forge with 2 choices dressed up like mercy: sign the non-disclosure settlement, accept blame by silence, and keep the plant from collapsing under lawsuits, or fight publicly, risk the plant closing, and watch half the town lose wages before winter. Silas wrote that he chose wrong, not because the pressure was not real, because real pressure did not turn wrong into right. Lorraine read that sentence twice. Caleb looked away. Walt wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Evan stood by the stove, silent. The letter continued. Silas had tried to help Daniel Reeves quietly. Small payments, repairs on his house, groceries left without a name. But quiet help had not restored Daniel's leg, his lost wages, or his dignity. Worse, the silence allowed the official story to harden. Silas Pike became the careless blacksmith. Daniel Reeves became the unfortunate worker. Mercer Pressworks became the innocent employer. And the replacement design remained alive. There were 5 names in the letter. Daniel Reeves, the injured worker. Harold Mott, who lost 2 fingers in a later maintenance accident. Peter Lyle, who quit after warning about frame vibration. Ruth Ann Bell, a bookkeeper who copied a supplier invoice and then disappeared from the company payroll. And Walt Kessler. Lorraine looked up. Walt's face crumpled. "I signed a statement saying your father delivered the approved lot," he said. "They told me it was just paperwork. They told me nobody would believe a floor hand over management anyway. You let them put his name on it." "Yes." Lorraine waited for rage. It did not come. Something colder came instead. A kind of clarity. The deep secret was not only that Silas had been blamed. It was that the town had accepted a lie because the lie protected paychecks, property values, reputations, and the comfort of not knowing who had been sacrificed to keep the machines running. Evan turned one of the current drawings toward Lorraine. If I send this to the safety board, they'll shut the line down immediately. And if you don't? If the assembly fails under full load, someone could die. Caleb pushed back from the table. So that's it? He said. We just hand it over and hope everyone forgives us when the plant closes. Lorraine looked at him. No one has to forgive us. My wife's medicine comes through that insurance. I know. No, Grandma. I don't think you do. His voice broke. You have spent my whole life keeping a building alive. I am trying to keep people alive. Lorraine did not flinch, because he was not wrong. That was the cruelty of it. Caleb was not Owen Mertens. He was not hiding a lie to protect profit. He was afraid because one honest act could still hurt innocent people. That was how silence survived. It always found someone innocent to stand in front of it. Silas had faced the same wall and failed. Lorraine looked down at the letter again. Near the bottom, Silas had written, "If this ever comes back, do not save my name first. Save whoever is standing near the machine, then tell the rest, even the part that shames me." Her eyes blurred. For 43 years, she had believed the promise was to guard the forge. Now she understood. The forge had only been a box. The promise was to open it. Lorraine took the current press spec, Silas's revision C drawing, the non-disclosure receipt, and the letter. She placed them in one stack. Then she took the steel pin from her pocket and set it on top. Caleb stared at it. What are you doing? What your great-grandfather asked me to do. You'll send it? To the safety board, Lorraine said. And to Daniel Reeves's daughter, if she's still alive. And to anyone whose name is in this letter. Caleb stood so quickly the chair scraped the floor. If Annie loses coverage, I will sell the house before I let her go without medicine. His face changed. She had not known she would say it until the words were out. But once spoken, they settled in her like iron, cooling into shape. Caleb's anger faltered. Grandma. Lorraine folded Silas's letter carefully. I spent my life defending your great-grandfather's pride, she said. I won't spend what's left defending his fear. Walt covered his face. Evan took out his phone. I know a state safety investigator, he said. Not company. State. Caleb looked from Evan to Lorraine, then toward the window where the silent factory sat under morning light. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he picked up the steel pin. He turned it in his hand the way Silas had once taught him. Will they hate us? He asked. Lorraine looked across the road at the factory, at the men and women who needed wages, at the building that had nearly turned warning into tragedy. Some will, she said. And the others? Lorraine took the pin gently from his hand. The others might live long enough to understand. By noon, everyone in Mercer Falls knew the plant was not reopening that day. By 1 o'clock, they knew why. Not the whole story. Stories never arrive whole in a town like Mercer Falls. They arrive in pieces, bent by fear, sharpened by anger, softened by pity, and carried from one person to another until no one knows which part was first. At the diner, someone said Lorraine Pike had shut down the plant over an old grudge. At the pharmacy, someone said she had saved second shift from getting crushed. At the gas station, 2 men argued beside the coffee machine until the clerk told them both to either buy something or take it outside. By 3, the county boardroom was full. Workers stood along the walls in steel-toed boots and plant jackets. Their spouses sat in the folding chairs with crossed arms and worried eyes. Beth Danner sat near the front with a folder thick enough to make people nervous. Owen Mertens stood beside the county attorney, speaking quietly, his face controlled but tight. Lorraine entered with Caleb on one side and Evan on the other. The room changed when they saw her. Some people looked ashamed. Some looked grateful. Some looked at her as if she had personally taken food off their tables. Caleb felt it. Lorraine could tell by the way his shoulders stiffened. Still, he did not move away from her. That mattered more than any apology she might hear. The county chair called the emergency session to order. Owen spoke first. He used careful words. He called the broken press an isolated mechanical failure. He called the 1,978 documents legacy paperwork. He said the company was committed to safety, transparency, and bringing Mercer Falls back to work as quickly as possible. Lorraine listened. When he finished, Evan stood. His hands shook slightly as he connected his laptop to the projector. I inspected the failed left frame assembly, he said. The failure pattern matches a warning written in 1978 by Silas Pike. Murmurs moved through the room. Evan put the drawing on the screen. Not the clean digital one, Silas's drawing. Oil-stained. Hand-marked. Red pencil circling the load path. Then Evan put the current press assembly beside it. These are not identical parts, he said, but they carry the same dangerous geometry. The stress groove remains too close to the load point. That is why the frame began to sing before failure. Someone in the back muttered. Sing? Caleb stepped forward before Lorraine could. It clicked through the floor, he said. I heard it. She told me what to listen for. The room went quiet. Then, Walt Kessler rose from the second row. It took him a long time to stand. Nobody rushed him. Maybe because he looked as if any breath might be the one that broke him. I worked the floor in 1978, Walt said. I signed a false statement after Daniel Reeves got hurt. A woman near the aisle gasped. Walt kept his eyes on the table in front of him. Silas Pike refused to approve the replacement pins. Management used them anyway. After the accident, they made it look like the bad lot came through his forge. Owen said, Mr. Kessler, I would caution. Walt turned toward him. I spent 43 years being cautious. That stopped Owen. Walt pulled a paper from his coat pocket. This is my affidavit. I signed it this morning. I am saying it in public because I should have said it before half the people in this room were born. Lorraine did not forgive him in that moment. Forgiveness was not a switch. But she looked at him, and for the first time, she saw not only the cowardice, but the weight of carrying it too long. Beth Danner stood next. As of this afternoon, she said, the Pike Forge is no longer scheduled for demolition. It is being preserved temporarily as an evidence site, pending state safety review. Owen's jaw tightened. Beth continued, the county will also request recovery of the missing 1,978 appendix and supplier records. The room erupted. Some people applauded. Others shouted. A man in a plant jacket stood and yelled, what are we supposed to do while the state takes its sweet time? Another voice answered, better than burying somebody. Then another. Easy to say if your paycheck isn't gone. Lorraine felt Caleb tense beside her. She stood before she was ready. The room did not quiet immediately. She waited until it did. I know what this costs, she said. A man near the wall laughed bitterly. Do you? Lorraine looked at him. My grandson works that line. His wife needs the insurance. If this plant stays closed, my family hurts too. That softened some faces. Not all. My father should have told the truth in 1978, she continued. He didn't. He was afraid the town would lose its work. He was afraid families would suffer. Those fears were real. But the lie did not protect people. It only waited for another machine and another shift. No one moved. I spent most of my life wanting his name cleared, she said. Now I am asking that his shame be recorded too. Not because I stopped loving him, because loving someone does not mean finishing their lie. Caleb looked down. Evan looked at the table. Walt covered his eyes. At the back of the room, an older woman stood with a cane. Lorraine recognized her only after she spoke. My father was Daniel Reeves. The room changed again. The woman's name was Linda Reeves. She said her father had spent the rest of his life walking with a brace, taking work he hated because the plant settlement had barely covered the hospital bills. He had never believed Silas Pike caused the accident, but he had died before proving it. Linda looked at Lorraine. I don't know whether to thank you or be angry it took this long. Lorraine nodded. That would be fair, she said. It was the first honest peace the room had been offered. By the end of the meeting, nothing was fixed. The plant would remain closed, pending inspection. The State Safety Board had accepted Evan's report. Walt's affidavit was filed with Beth's office. The county attorney agreed to open the missing records request. Owen refused to admit wrongdoing beyond historical uncertainty, but his voice no longer filled the room the way it had before. Outside, people gathered in the parking lot. Some avoided Lorraine. Some shook her hand. One man from second shift came up with wet eyes and said, "My boy works under that frame." That was all he said. It was enough. Caleb walked with Lorraine back toward the forge after sunset. The factory was dark behind them. For the first time since the industrial corridor opened, the old road sounded like it used to. Wind through wire grass, a dog barking far off, gravel under shoes. At the forge door, Caleb stopped. "I'm still scared," he said. Lorraine touched the Orange County tape stretched across the entrance. "So am I. I was ashamed of this place." "I know," He swallowed. I'm not now. Lorraine did not trust herself to answer, so she handed him Silas's pin. Caleb looked at it, then closed his fingers around the steel. Behind them, the factory stayed silent, but the silence no longer felt like the end of work. It felt like the beginning of truth. 3 months later, the factory press started again. Not with celebration. No ribbon, no mayor's speech, no brass band in the parking lot. It began on a gray Monday morning after state inspectors had gone through every left frame assembly, every supplier record they could still find, and every revision note that had survived the many cleanups of company history. The old assembly was gone. In its place sat a redesigned locking system based partly on Silas Pike's Revision C drawing and partly on modern testing. Evan Caro had insisted be done under full load, not just on a screen. Evan no longer worked for Owen Mertens. That surprised no one. He had resigned before they could make him quiet, and 2 weeks later, the state safety office hired him as a technical consultant. People in Mercer Falls argued about that too. Some called him brave. Some called him ambitious. Lorraine thought both could be true. People were rarely only one thing. Owen remained at the plant, but not in the same way. His title had been changed. His voice carried less weight. He still wore the factory jacket. But men who once moved aside when he passed now looked at him longer than they used to. Walt Kessler's affidavit reopened the 1978 case, though no one pretended justice could arrive whole after 43 years. Daniel Reeves was gone. Harold Mott was gone. Ruth Ann Bell had no children anyone could find. But Linda Reeves received copies of the documents, and when she came to Lorraine's house one afternoon, she brought her father's old work badge in a small envelope. I don't know where this belongs, Linda said. Lorraine looked toward the forge. Not in a drawer, she answered. The forge itself did not survive the winter. Not all of it. Once the investigation team finished, a structural engineer gave Lorraine the truth plainly. The chimney could fall. The back wall had shifted. The roof had rot hidden under the patched tin. Keeping it standing would cost more than the land, more than the house, more than Lorraine had left. Caleb expected her to fight. For a week, she almost did. She stood inside the old building after the county tape came down, running her hand over the workbench, the bellows frame, the black mouth of the hearth. She could still see Silas at the anvil. She could still see Caleb as a boy, cheeks smudged, eyes bright. She could still hear the years inside that room. But one morning, she understood what her father had tried to tell her. Not the bricks. The truth needs a place to wait. It had waited. Now it needed a place to move. So Lorraine signed the removal order herself. The workers came on a cold, clear morning. Caleb stood beside her as the chimney came down brick by brick. They saved what could be saved. The anvil, the leather apron, the small iron mold, the bellows handle, Silas's measuring caliper, the original Revision C drawing, and a row of sample pins wrapped in oilcloth. The rest came apart under careful hands. When the back wall fell, sunlight entered the forge from a direction Lorraine had never seen before. She cried then, not loudly. Caleb put his arm around her shoulders, and neither of them spoke until the last board was loaded. By spring, the community college in Mercer Falls opened a small technical program inside a former auto shop near the highway. It was not named after Silas Pike. Lorraine had refused that. No clean names for crooked stories, she told them. Instead, the sign over the door read, The Live Load Workshop. Under it, smaller letters, safety, craft, and responsibility in metalwork. On the first day, 12 students arrived. Some were plant workers retraining during the slow restart. Some were teenagers who had never held a file. One was Linda Reeves's grandson. Caleb came too, not as a student exactly, not as a teacher exactly, but as someone learning how to stand between both. Lorraine sat near the back, while Caleb placed Silas's pin on the bench. He did not begin with the story. He began with the sound. He set one steel rod across 2 blocks and tapped it lightly with a hammer. The note rang clean. Then he set another beside it, one with a hairline flaw cut deep where no student could see. He tapped that one too. The sound was different. Not dramatic, not loud, just wrong. A girl in the front row raised her hand. How are we supposed to hear that? Caleb smiled a little. You stopped deciding you already know what it should sound like. Lorraine looked down at her hands. They were older now than Silas's had been in her earliest memories. Veins raised. Knuckles stiff. Skin thin enough to show every year. But when Caleb called her forward, she stood. He handed her the hammer. For a moment, she was back in the forge, 7 years old, her father's hand covering hers. She tapped the flawed rod once. The room listened. "That," Lorraine said, "is steel asking not to be ignored." No one laughed. Outside, the factory press ran again across town. Its rhythm was different now, slower during testing, watched more carefully, respected more honestly. People still needed paychecks. Families still worried. Annie still counted medicine in a plastic organizer on Sunday nights. The investigation was not finished, and maybe it would never satisfy everyone, but the old lie had lost its shelter. Later that afternoon, Lorraine walked with Caleb to the place where the forge had stood. Grass had begun to push through the disturbed soil. The pin bed had been marked with 4 low stones. Not a memorial exactly, more like a boundary people were no longer allowed to forget. Caleb held the leather apron folded over one arm. "Do you miss it?" he asked. Lorraine looked at the empty ground. "Yes. Do you regret taking it down?" She thought about that. Then she shook her head. "I kept it as long as it needed keeping." Across the road, the press struck its new rhythm. Steady, heavy, clean. Lorraine closed her eyes and listened. For once, the steel did not sound afraid.